Quiet on the set.
Right on the set. Roll music.
Roll sound.
We got the nice beach down by the sea. Data check. Double chum.
Double chum. Double chum. Here it is. Like that.
All right. Maybe a little bit louder than that.
You put it through my ears too?
Yeah. Let me do this. Yeah? I'm gonna try to keep that on a repeat and just read. Because during the shuffle, they're just shuffling their asses down the beach, bud.
It is a beach shuffle, you know?
It is a beach shuffle.
Got the ocean waves. Hear some wind blowing. And smell the pina colada.
Yes. All of that. Oh shit.
I am super stoked to be doing more of this.
To be honest, I am fully enjoying reading through the series. I'm loving the story. I'm loving the connection with the characters, the variety of characters, and I'm stoked. But I've been told that what comes after this episode is part 3, and that's where we meet the Lady of Shadows. And I hear that that's a make or break kind of section of the book.
It has been said by many people who've read this that it is tough because of the nature of the content there.
Nature of the content, the delivery of the content.
Yeah.
It's very trigger warning-esque. But
could be, yeah.
I mean, it's also set in that time. I mean, it doesn't make it okay, but it's set in that time, and it's shit.
It's what was written, and what was written was there for a reason.
Yes, I think that it was purposefully put there, and is generally put there on purpose to get that emotion from the reader, because it's a make or break for characters. You're gonna like them or you're gonna hate them. And I think that
I think it's okay either way. Like you just have to have a reaction. Like, it's okay if you hate that character. You know, it's okay if you don't think it's like the best character ever.
But I think that's the intention of the writer too.
Yes.
Because you're gonna loathe them or love them. I mean, by the time the story's over, and I think that's what the writer wants you to do. I mean, if I wrote a book, that's what I would do. So I mean, why not? All right, so tonight we are going to read through another chapter of The Drawing of the Three by Stephen King. Where we last left off, we were in The Prisoner. We had met Eddie Dean and
a
whole bunch of shit happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like if you want to know, you should go back and find out.
Yeah, I mean that's Drawing of the Three Part 2 in my channel. But also hit up the book club where we talk about it afterwards over on the Sneak Thieves channel. _Sneak Thief.
Kind of like a summary.
Yeah. How certain things made us feel. If we liked a part, if we didn't like a part. And there's
play by play. Talk about some things.
A fun thing that we do at the very end of the stream. I absolutely love it, but I think you
how
should
about we
go and
don't say
check
what
out
it is? Yeah.
that stream so you can find out.
It's at the end of every episode.
That was already intended, but every time at the end we do
You're
two
smart,
things. You should go check it out. All right, you ready, Snake?
Yeah, I'll be reading the part of Edward Cantor Dean.
Edward Cantor Dean.
I don't believe there's many other parts besides that in Roland, so.
Right.
I'm ready, yeah.
All right, let's get into it. Shuffle.
You did a good job. Yours sounded good. Mine sounds like I'm like making fun of the guy.
Shuffle. The time following that night was broken time for Roland. Time that didn't really exist as time at all. What he remembered was only a series of images, moments, conversations without context. Images flashing past like one-eyed jacks and trays and nines and the bloody black bitch queen of spiders and a card sharp's rapid shuffle. Later on, he asked Eddie how long that time lasted, but Eddie didn't know either. Time had been destroyed for both of them. There was no time in hell, and each of them was in their own private hell. Roland, the hell of the fever and infection. Eddie, the hell of withdrawal.
It was less than a week.
Eddie said.
That's all I know for sure.
How do you know that?
A week's worth of pills is all I had to give you. After that, you were going to have to do the one thing or the other on your own.
Get well or die.
Right.
Shuffle. There's a gunshot as twilight draws down to dark. A dry crack and pinging on the inevitable and ineluctable sound of the breakers dying on the desolate beach. Kablam!
Like that. Kablam!
He smells a whiff of gunpowder. Trouble, the gunslinger thinks weakly, and gropes for revolvers that aren't there. Oh no, it's the end. But there's no more. As something starts to smell. Shuffle. Good in the dark. Something, after all this long, dark, dry time, something is cooking. It's not just the smell. He can hear the snap and pop of twigs. He can see the faint orange flicker of a campfire. Sometimes, when the sea breeze gusts, he smells fragrant smoke as well as the mouth-watering other smell. Food, he thinks. My God, am I hungry? If I'm hungry, maybe I'm getting well. Eddie, he tries to say, but his voice is all gone. His throat hurts so bad. We should have brought some Aston, too, he thinks. And then he tries to laugh. All the drugs for him, none for Eddie. Eddie appears. He's got a tin plate, one the gunslinger would know anywhere. It came, after all, from his own purse. On it are steaming chunks of whitish pink meat. What? He tries to ask, and nothing comes out but a squeaky little farting sound. Eddie reads the shape of his lips.
I don't know.
He says crossly.
All I know is it didn't eat me. Eat it, damn you.
He sees Eddie very pale. Eddie is very pale. Eddie is shaking, and he smells something coming from Eddie that is either shit or death. And he knows Eddie is in a bad way. He reaches out a groping hand, wanting to give comfort. Eddie strikes it away.
I'll feed you,
he says crossly.
Fucked if I know why. I ought to kill you. I would, if I didn't think that you could get through into my world once. Maybe you could do it again.
Eddie looks around.
And if it wasn't for that, I'd be alone. Except for them.
He looks back at Roland, and a fit of shuddering ruin runs through him. It is so fierce that he almost spills the chunks of meat on the tin plate. At last, it passes.
Eat, goddamn you.
The gunslinger eats. The meat is more than not bad. The meat is delicious. He manages 3 pieces, and then everything blurs into a new shuffle. Shuffle. Effort to speak, but all he can do is whisper. The cup of Eddie's ear is pressed against his lips, except every now and then it shudders away as Eddie goes through one of his spasms. He says it again. North. Up. Up the beach.
How do you know?
Just know, he whispers. Eddie looks at him.
You're crazy.
He says. The gunslinger smiles and tries to black out, but Eddie slaps him hard. Roland's blue eyes fly open for a moment. They are so alive and electric, Eddie looks uneasy. Then his lips draw back in a smile that is mostly snarl.
Yeah, you can drone off,
He said.
but first you gotta take your dope. It's time. Son says it is anyway, I guess. I was never no Boy Scout, so I don't know for sure. But I guess it's close enough for government work. Open wide, Roland. Open wide for Dr. Eddie, you kidnapping fuck.
The gunslinger opens his mouth like a baby for the breast. Eddie puts 2 of the pills in his mouth and then slops fresh water carelessly into Roland's mouth. Roland guesses it must be from the hill stream somewhere to the east. It might be poison. Eddie wouldn't know fair water from foul. On the other hand, Eddie seems fine himself, and there's really no choice, is there? No. He swallows, coughs, and nearly strangles while Eddie looks at him indifferently. Roland reaches for him. Eddie tries to draw away. The gunslinger's bullshitter eyes command him. Roland draws him close, so close he can smell the stink of Eddie's sickness, and Eddie can smell the stink of his. The combination sickens and compels them both. Only 2 choices here, Roland whispers. Don't know how it is in your world, but only 2 choices here. Stand, and maybe live, or die on your knees with your head down and the stink of your own armpits in your nose. Nothing. He hacks out a cough. Nothing to me.
Who are you?
Eddie screams at him. Your destiny, Eddie, the gunslinger whispers.
Why don't you just eat shit and die?
Eddie asks him. The gunslinger tries to speak, but before he can, he floats off as the cards shuffle. Kablam! Roland opens his eyes on a billion stars wheeling through the blackness, then closes them again. He doesn't know what's going on, but he thinks everything's okay. The deck's still moving. The cards still shuffle. More of the sweet, tasty chunks of meat. He feels better. Eddie looks better too, but he also looks worried.
They're getting closer.
He says,
They may be ugly, but they ain't completely stupid. They know what I've been doing. Somehow they know, and they don't dig it. Every night they get a little closer. It might be smart to move on when daybreak comes, if you can. Or it might be the last daybreak we ever see.
Wait. This is not exactly a whisper, but a husk somewhere in between a whisper and real speech.
Them!
Eddie says, and gestures toward the beach.
Data check, dumb chum, and all that shit.
Oh, there, yeah.
I think they're like us, Roland, all for eating, but not too big on getting eaten.
Suddenly, in another blast of horror, Roland realizes what the whitish-pink chunks of meat Eddie has been feeding him have been. He cannot speak. Revulsion robs him of what little voice he has managed to get back. But Eddie sees everything he wants to say on his face.
What did you think I was doing?
He nearly snarls.
Calling Red Lobster for takeout?
They're poison, Roland whispers. That's why...
Yeah, that's why you're hors de combat. What I'm trying to keep you from being, Roland, my friend, is hors d'oeuvres as well. That's hors d'oeuvres, isn't it?
Hors d'oeuvres, yes.
Hors de combat and hors d'oeuvres as well. As far as poison goes, rattlesnakes are poison, but people eat them. Rattlesnakes taste real good, like chicken. I read that somewhere. They look like lobsters to me, so I decided to take a chance. What else are we gonna eat, dirt? I shot one of the fuckers and cooked the living Christ out of it. There wasn't anything else. And actually, they taste pretty good. I've been shooting one a night just after the sun starts to go down. They're not real lively until it gets completely dark. I never saw you turning this stuff down.
Eddie smiles.
I like to think maybe I got one of the ones that ate Jack. I like to think I'm eating that dink. It, eases my mind, you know?
One of them ate a part of me, too, the gunslinger husks out. 2 fingers, 1 toe.
That's also cool.
Eddie keeps smiling. His face is pallid, shark-like. But some of that ill look has gone now, and the smell of shit and death which has hung around him like a shroud seems to be going away. Fuck yourself, the gunslinger husks.
Roland shows a flash of spirit.
Eddie cries. Maybe you ain't gonna
die after
Son
all.
of a bitch,
Golly,
damn it.
I think that's marvelous.
Damn it. I thought it was it.
No, sir.
Live, Roland says. The husk has become a whisper again. The fishhooks are returning to his throat.
Yeah?
Eddie looks at him, then nods and answers his own question.
Yeah, I think you mean to. Once I thought you were going, and once I thought you were gone. Now it looks like you're gonna get better. The antibiotics are helping, I guess. But mostly I think you're hauling yourself up. What for? Why the fuck do you keep trying so hard to keep alive on this scuzzy beach?
Tower, he mouths, because now he can't even manage a husk.
You and your fucking tower.
Eddie says, starts to turn away and then turns back, surprised, as Roland's hands clamps on his arm like a manacle. They look into each other's eyes and Eddie says,
All right.
North, the gunslinger mouths. North, I told you. Has he told him that? He thinks so, but it's lost. Lost in the shuffle.
How do you know?
Eddie screams at him in the sudden frustration. He raises his fists as if to strike Roland, then lowers them. I just know. So why do you waste my time and energy asking me foolish questions? He wants to reply, but before he can, the cards shuffle. Being dragged along, bounced and bumped, his head lolling helplessly from one side to the other, bound to some of the weird travois by his own gun belts. And he can hear Eddie Dean singing a song which is so weirdly familiar. He at first believes this must be a delirium dream.
Hey, Jude. Don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better.
Where did you hear that? He wants to ask. Did you hear me singing it, Eddie? And where are we? But before he can ask anything, shuffle. Fucking love it. Court would bash the kid's head in if he saw that contraption, Roland thinks, looking at the travois upon which he had spent the day, and laughs. It isn't much of a laugh. It sounded like one of those waves dropping its loads of stones on the beach. He doesn't know how far they've come, but it's far enough for Eddie to be totally bushed. He's sitting on a rock in the lengthening light with one of the gunslinger's revolvers in his lap and a half-full water skin to one side. There's a small bulge in his shirt pocket. These are the bullets from the back of the gun belts, the diminishing supply of good bullets. Eddie has tied these up in a piece of his own shirt. The main reason the supply of good bullets is diminishing so fast is because one of every 4 or 5 has also turned out to be a dud. Eddie, who has been nearly dozing, now looks up.
What are you laughing about?
He asks. The gunslinger waves a dismissive hand and shakes his head because he's wrong. He realizes Court wouldn't bash Eddie for the travois, even though it was an odd, lame-looking thing. Roland thinks it might even be possible that Court might grunt some word of compliment. Such a rarity that the boy whom it happened hardly ever knew how to respond. He was left gaping like a fish just pulled from a cook's barrel. The man's supports were 2 cottonwood branches of approximately the same length and thickness. A blowdown, the gunslinger presumed. He had used smaller branches as supports, attaching them to the support poles with a crazy conglomeration of stuff. Gun belts, the glue string that held the devil powder to his chest, even the rawhide thong from his gunslinger's hat, and his, Eddie's, own sneaker laces. He had laid the gunslinger's bedroll over the supports. Court would not have struck him because, sick as he was, Eddie had at least done more than squat on his hunkers and bewail his fate. He had made something. He had tried. And Court might have offered one of his abrupt, almost grudging compliments because, crazy as the thing looked, it worked. The long tracks stretching down the beach to a point where they seemed to come together at the rim of perspective proved that.
You see any of them?
Eddie asks. The sun is going down, beating an orange path across the water. And so the gunslinger reckons he has been out better than 6 hours this time. He feels stronger. He sits up and looks down to the water. Neither the beach nor the land sweeping to the western slope of the mountains have changed much. Hold on. Okay. He can see small variations of landscape and detritus, a dead seagull, for instance. Detritus? Thank you, sir. Yeah. A dead seagull, for instance, lying on the little heap of blowing feathers on the sand about 20 yards to the left and 30 or so closer to the water. But these aside, they might as well be right where they started. No, the gunslinger says. Then, yes, there's one. He points. Eddie squints, then nods. As the sun sinks lower and the orange track begins to look more and more like blood, the first of the lobstrosities come tumbling out of the waves and begin crawling up the beach. Two of them race clumsily toward the dead gull. The winner pounces on it, rips it open, and begins to stuff the rotting remains into its maw. Did it, chick? It asks. Oh, there you go. Sweet! Let's do that again. Did it, chick? It asks.
Double jump.
Responds the loser.
Tada.
Kablam!
Bam!
Roland's gun puts an end to the second creature's questions. Eddie walks down to it and grabs it by the back, keeping a wary eye on its fellow as he does so. The other offers no trouble, however. It is busy with the gull. Eddie brings his kill back. It is still twitching, raising and lowering its claws, but soon enough it stops moving. The tail arches one final time, then simply drops instead of flexing downward. The boxer's claws hang limp.
Dinner will soon be served, master,
Eddie says.
You have your choice. Fillet of creepy crawler or fillet of creepy crawler. Which strikes your fancy, master?
I don't understand you, the gunslinger says.
Sure you do,
Eddie said.
You just don't have any sense of humor. What happened to it?
Shot off in one war or another, I guess. Eddie smiles at that.
You look and sound a little more alive tonight, Roland.
I am, I think.
Well, maybe you could even walk a little while tomorrow. I'll tell you very frankly, my friend, dragging you is the pits and the shits.
I'll try.
You do that.
You know, you look a little better too, Roland ventures. His voice cracks on the last two words like the voice of a young boy. If I don't stop talking soon, he thought, I won't be able to talk at all again.
I guess I'll live.
He looks at Roland expressionlessly.
You'll never know how close it was a couple of times, though. Once I took one of your guns and put it against my head, cocked it, held it there for a while, and then took it away. Eased the hammer down and shoved it back in your holster. Another night, I had a convulsion. I think it was the second night, but I'm not sure.
He shakes his head and says something the gunslinger both does and doesn't understand.
Michigan seems like a dream to me now.
Although his voice is down to that husky murmur again and he knows he shouldn't be talking at all, the gunslinger has to know one thing. What stopped you from pulling the trigger?
Well, this is the only pair of pants I got.
Eddie said.
At the last second, I thought if I pulled the trigger and it was one of those dud shells, I'd never get up the guts to do it again. And once you shit your pants, you gotta wash them right away or live with the stink forever. Henry told me that. He said he learned it in Nam. And since it was nighttime and Lester the lobster was out, not to mention all his friends.
But the gunslinger is laughing hard, although only an occasional cracked sound actually escapes his lips. Smiling a little himself, Eddie says,
I think maybe you only got your sense of humor shot off up to the elbow in that war.
he gets up, meaning to go up the slope to where there will be fuel for a fire, Roland supposes. Wait, he whispers, and Eddie looks at him. Why, really?
I guess because you needed me. If I'd killed myself, you would have died. Later on, after you're really on your feet again, I may, re-examine my options.
He looks around and sighs deeply.
There may be a Disneyland or Coney Island somewhere in your world, Roland, but what I've seen of it so far really doesn't interest me much.
He starts away, pauses, and looks back again at Roland. His face is somber, although some of the sickly pallor has left it. The shakes have become no more than occasional tremors.
Sometimes you really don't understand me, do you?
No, the gunslinger whispers. Sometimes I don't.
Then I'll elucidate. There are people who need people to need them. The reason you don't understand is because you're not one of those people. You'd use me and then toss me away like a paper bag if that's what it came down to. God fucked you, my friend. You're just smart enough so it would hurt you to do that, and just hard enough so you'd go ahead and do it anyway. You wouldn't be able to help yourself. If I was lying on the beach there and screaming for help, you'd walk over me if I was between you and your goddamn tower. Isn't that pretty close to the truth?
Roland says nothing, only watches Eddie.
But not everyone is like that. There are people who need people to need them. Like the Barbra Streisand song, corny but true. It's just another way of being hooked through the bag.
Eddie gazes at him.
But when it comes to that, you're clean, aren't you?
Roland watches him.
Except for your tower.
Eddie utters a short laugh.
You're a tower junkie, Roland.
Which war was it? Roland
What?
whispers.
What?
The one where you... Oh.
That's
Yeah, the one where you got your sense of nobility and purpose shot off. Eddie recoils as if Roland has reached out and slapped him.
I'm gonna go get some water.
He says shortly.
Keep an eye on the creepy crawlers. We've come a long way today, but I still don't know if they talk to each other or not.
He turns away then, but not before Roland has seen the last red rays of sunset reflected on his wet cheeks. Roland turns back to the beach and watches. The lobstrosities crawl and question and crawl, but both activities seem aimless. They have some intelligence, but not enough to pass on information to others of their kind. God doesn't always dish it in your face, Roland thinks. Most times, but not always. Eddie returns with wood.
Well?
He asks.
What do you think?
We're all right, the gunslinger croaks, and Eddie starts to say something, but the gunslinger is tired now and lies back and looks at the first stars peeking through the canopy of violet sky and... Shuffle.
Got really into that one.
Give me just a second. Jack came over and he poured out water on my desk.
Why?
He knocked it over.
That's it.
Yes.
Shuffle him. Shuffle. Everything good?
Yeah, Jack he had a question for me.
Oh. Love the beach sound, by the way. It's really soothing. Don't forget, guys, if you're enjoying the read-through, please hit the thumbs up. Let everyone know that you are watching and having fun. Maybe tell them we do this live every week, sometimes twice a week. We are looking for other people who are willing to jump in and be part of the magic with us. Maybe some more voices in here wouldn't be too terrible. If you're interested, just contact either him or I. Let us know if you would like to try doing this with us. That'd be great.
I'm back.
Good.
Shuffle. And mark the cut so we can get through it. In the 3 days that followed, the gunslinger progressed steadily back to health. The red lines creeping up his arms first reversed the direction, then faded, then disappeared. On the next day, he sometimes walked and sometimes let Eddie drag him. On the day following, he didn't need to be dragged at all. Every hour or two, they simply sat for a period of time until the watery feeling went out of his legs. It was during these rests and in those times after dinner had been eaten, but before the fire had burned all the way down and they went to sleep, that the gunslinger heard about Henry and Eddie. He remembered wondering what had happened to make their brothering so difficult. But after Eddie had begun, haltingly, and with that sort of resentful anger that proceeds from deep pain, the gunslinger could have stopped him, could have told him, "Don't bother, Eddie. I understand everything." Except that wouldn't have helped Eddie. Eddie wasn't talking to help Henry because Henry was dead. He was talking to bury Henry for good, and to remind himself that although Henry was dead, he, Eddie, wasn't. So the gunslinger listened and said nothing. The gist was simple. Eddie believed he had stolen his brother's life. Henry also believed this. Henry might have believed it on his own, or he might have believed it because he so frequently heard their mother lecturing Eddie on how much both she and Henry had sacrificed for him. So Eddie could be as safe as anyone could be in this jungle of a city. So he could be happy. As happy as anyone could be in this jungle of a city. So he wouldn't end up like his poor sister that he didn't even hardly remember, but she had been so beautiful. God love her. She was with the angels, and that was undoubtedly a wonderful place to be, but she didn't want Eddie to be with the angels just yet. Run over in the road by some crazy drunken driver like his sister, or cut up by some crazy junkie kid for the 25 cents in his pocket and left him with his guts running out all over the sidewalk. And because he didn't think Eddie wanted to be with the angels yet, he just better listen to what his big brother said and do what his big brother said to do, and always remember that Henry was making a love sacrifice. Eddie told the gunslinger he doubted if his mother knew some of the things they had done, flitching comic books from the candy store or on Rincon Avenue, or smoking cigarettes behind the bonded electroplate factory on Coho Street. Once he saw a Chevrolet with the keys in it, and although Henry barely knew how to drive, he was 16 then. Eddie 8. He had crammed his brother into the car, and they said they were going to New York City. Eddie was scared, crying. Henry scared too and mad at Eddie, telling him to shut up, telling him to stop being such a fucking baby. He had $10 and Eddie had 3 or 4. They could go to the movies all fucking day and then catch a Pelham train and be back before their mother had time to put supper on the table and wonder where they were. But Eddie kept crying, and near the Queensboro Bridge they saw a police car on a side street, and although Eddie was pretty sure the cop in it hadn't even been looking their way, he said, "Yeah?" When Henry asked him in a harsh, quavering voice if Eddie thought that Bull had seen them. Henry turned white and pulled over so fast that he almost amputated a fire hydrant. He was running down the block while Eddie, now in a panic himself, was still struggling with the unfamiliar door handle. Henry stopped, came back, and hauled Eddie out of the car. He also slapped him twice. Then they had walked. Well, actually, they slunk all the way back to Brooklyn. It took them most of the day, and when their mother asked them why they looked so hot and sweaty and tired out, Henry said it was because he'd spent most of the day teaching Eddie how to go one-on-one in the basketball court at the playground around the block. Then some big kids came by and they had to run. Their mother kissed Henry and beamed at Eddie. She asked him if he didn't have the bestest big brother in the world. Eddie agreed with her. This was honest agreement too. He thought he did.
He was as scared as I was that day.
Eddie told Roland as they sat and watched the last of the day dwindle from the water, where soon the only light would be that reflected from the stars.
Scared her, really, because he thought the cops saw us, and I know he didn't. That's why he ran, but he came back. That's the important part. He came back.
Roland said nothing.
You see that, don't you?
Eddie was looking at Roland with harsh, questioning eyes. I see.
He was always scared, but he always came back.
Roland thought it would have been better for Eddie, maybe better for both of them in the long run, if Henry had just kept showing his heels that day, or on one of the others. But people like Henry never did. People like Henry always came back, because people like Henry did know how to use. First, they changed trust into need. Then they changed need into a drug. And once that was done, what was Eddie's word for it? Push? Yes, they pushed it. I think I'll turn in, the gunslinger said.
Uh-oh.
Oh. Preemptive shuffle there, guys.
Sorry, I had it like loaded up.
There was a pause.
It didn't happen. It's just a pause.
The next day, Eddie went on, but Roland already knew it all. Henry hadn't played sports in high school because Henry couldn't stay after for the practice. Henry had to take care of Eddie. The fact that Henry was scrawny and uncoordinated and didn't much care for sports in the first place had nothing to do with it, of course. Henry would have made a wonderful baseball pitcher or one of those basketball jumpers, their mother assured them both time and time again. Henry's grades were bad and he needed to repeat a number of subjects, but that wasn't because Henry was stupid. Eddie and Mrs. Dean both knew Henry was just as smart as lickety-split, but Henry had to spend the time he should have spent studying or doing homework taking care of Eddie. The fact that this usually took place in the Dean living room with both boys sprawled on the sofa watching TV or wrestling around on the floor somehow seemed not to matter. The bad grades meant Henry hadn't been able to be accepted into anything but NYU, and they couldn't afford it because the bad grades precluded any scholarships. And then Henry got drafted, and then it was Vietnam, where Henry got most of his knee blown off, and the pain was bad, and the drug they gave him for it had a heavy morphine base. And then he was better. They weaned him from the drug, only they didn't do such a good job because when Henry got back to New York, there was still a monkey on his back, a hungry monkey waiting to be fed. And after a month or two, he had gone out to see a man. And it had been about 4 months later, less than a month after their mother died, when Eddie first saw his brother snorting some white powder off a mirror. Eddie assumed it was coke. Turned out it was heroin. And if you traced it all the way back, whose fault was it? Roland said nothing, but heard the voice of Court in his mind. You want to do Court?
Yeah. Fault always lies in the same place, my fine babies. With him weak enough to lay blame.
When he discovered the truth, Eddie had been shocked, then angry. Henry had responded not by promising to quit snorting, but by telling Eddie he didn't blame him for being mad. He knew Nam had turned him into a worthless shitbag. He was weak. He would leave. That was the best thing. Eddie was right. The last thing he needed was a filthy junkie around, messing up the place. He just hoped Eddie wouldn't blame him too much. He had gotten weak, he admitted it. Something in Nam had made him weak, had rotted him out the same way the moisture rotted the laces of your sneakers and the elastic of your underwear. There was also something in Nam that apparently rotted out your heart, Henry told him tearily. He just hoped that Eddie would remember for all the years he had tried to be strong for Eddie, for Mom. So Henry tried to leave, and Eddie, of course, couldn't let him. Eddie was consumed with guilt. Eddie had seen the scared horror that had once been an unmarked leg. Thank you.
Scarred horror.
Yeah. Eddie had seen this scarred horror that had once been an unmarked leg, a knee that was now more Teflon than bone. They had a screaming match in the hall, Henry standing there in an old pair of khakis with his packed duffel bag in one hand and purple rings under his eyes. Eddie wearing nothing but a pair of yellowing jockey shorts. Henry saying, "You don't need me around, Eddie. I'm poison to you and I know it." And Eddie yelling back, "You ain't going anywhere. Get your ass back inside." And that's how it went until Mrs. McGursky came out of her place and yelled, "Go or stay. It's nothing to me, but you better decide one way or the other pretty quick or I'm calling the police." Mrs. McGursky seemed about to add a few more admonishments, but just then he saw that Eddie was wearing nothing but a pair of skivvies. She added, "And you're not decent, Eddie Dean," before popping back inside. It was like watching a Jack-in-the-Box in reverse. Eddie looked at Henry. Henry looked at Eddie.
Look like Angel Baby done put on a few pounds,
Henry said in a low voice, and then they were howling with laughter, holding on to each other and pounding each other, and Henry came back inside, and about 2 weeks later, Eddie was snorting the stuff too. And he couldn't understand why the hell he had made such a big deal out of it. After all, it was only snorting shit. It got you off. And as Henry, who Eddie eventually come to think of it as the great sage of Eminent Junkie, said, in a world that was clearly going to hell head first, what was so low about getting high? Time passed. Eddie didn't say how much. The gunslinger didn't ask. He guessed that Eddie knew there were 1,000 excuses for getting high, but no reasons, and that he had kept his habit pretty well under control, and that Henry had also managed to keep his under control, not as well as Eddie, but enough to keep from coming completely unraveled. Because whether or not Eddie understood the truth, down deep, Roland believed Eddie did. Henry must have. Their positions had reversed themselves. Now Eddie held Henry's hand crossing the streets. The day came when Eddie caught Henry not snorting, but skin popping. There had been another hysterical argument, almost exact repeat of the first one, except it had been in Henry's bedroom. It ended in almost exactly the same way, with Henry weeping and offering that implacable and arguable defense that was utter surrender. Utter admission. Eddie was right. He wasn't fit to live, not fit to eat garbage from the gutter. He would go. Eddie would never have to see him again. He just hoped he would remember all the... It faded into a drone that wasn't much different from the rocky sound of the breaking waves as they trudged up the beach. Roland knew the story and said nothing. It was Eddie who didn't know the story. And Eddie, who was really clear-headed for the first time in maybe 10 years or more. Eddie wasn't telling the story to Roland. Eddie was finally telling the story to himself. That was all right. So far as the gunslinger could see, time was something they had a lot of. Talk was one way to fill it. Eddie said he was haunted by Henry's knee, the twisted scar tissue, and up and down his leg. Of course, that was all healed now. Henry barely even limped, except when he and Eddie were quarreling. Then the limp always seemed to get worse. He was haunted by all the things Henry had given up for him, haunted by something much more pragmatic. Henry wouldn't last out on the streets. He would be like a rabbit let loose in a jungle filled with tigers. On his own, Henry would wind up in jail or Bellevue before a week was out. So he begged, and Henry finally did him the favor of consenting to stick around, and 6 months after that, Eddie also gotten Eddie also had a golden arm. From that moment, things had begun to move in the steady and things had begun to move in the steady and inevitable downward spiral, which had ended with Eddie's trip to the Bahamas and Roland's sudden intervention in his life. Another man, less pragmatic and more introspective than Roland, might have asked to himself, if not out loud, why this one? Why this man to start? Why a man who seems to promise weakness or strangeness or even outright doom? Not only did the gunslinger never ask the question, it never even formulated itself in his mind. Cuthbert would have asked. Cuthbert had questioned everything, had been poisoned with questions, had died with one in his mouth. Now they were gone. All gone. Court's last gunslingers, the 13 survivors of a beginning class that had numbered 56, were all dead. All dead but Roland. He was the last gunslinger going steadily in a world that had grown stale and sterile and empty. 13, he remembered Court saying on the day before their presentation ceremonies. This is an evil number. And on the following day, for the first time in 30 years, Court had not been present at the ceremonies. His final crop of pupils had gone to his cottage. To first kneel at his feet, presenting defenseless necks, then to rise and receive his congratulatory kiss, and to allow him to load their guns for the first time. 9 weeks later, Court was dead. Of poison, some said. 2 years after his death, the final bloody civil war had begun. The Red Slaughter had reached the last bastion of civilization, light, and sanity, and had taken away what all of them had assumed was so strong with the casual ease of a wave taking a child's castle of sand. So he was the last, and perhaps he had survived because the dark romance in his nature was overset by his practicality and simplicity. He understood that only 3 things mattered: mortality, Ka, and the tower. Those were enough things to think about. Eddie finished his tale around 4 o'clock on the 3rd day of their northward journey up the featureless beach. The beach itself never seemed to change. If a sign of progress was wanted, it could only be obtained by looking left to the east. There, the jagged peaks of the mountains had begun to soften and slump a bit. It was possible that if they went north far enough, the mountains would become rolling hills. With his story told, Eddie lapsed into silence and they walked without speaking for a half an hour or longer. Eddie kept stealing little glances at him. Roland knew Eddie wasn't aware that he was picking these glances up. He was still too much in himself. Roland also knew that what Eddie was waiting for, a response. Some kind of response, any kind. Twice, Eddie opened his mouth only to close it again. Finally, he asked what the gunslinger had known he would ask.
So, what do you think?
I think you're here. Eddie stopped, fisted hands planted on his hips.
That's all? That's it?
That's all I know, the gunslinger replied. His missing fingers and toe throbbed and itched. He wished for some of the Aston from Eddie's world.
You don't have any opinion on what the hell it all means.
The gunslinger might have held up his subtracted right hand and said, "Think about what this means, you silly idiot." But it no more crossed his mind to say this than it had to ask why it was Eddie. Out of all the people in the universes that might exist. It's Ka, he said, facing Eddie patiently.
What's Ka?
Eddie's voice was truculent.
I never heard of it. Except if you say it twice when you come out. Except if you say it twice, you come out with the baby word for shit.
I don't know about that, the gunslinger said. Here, it means duty or destiny, or, in the Vulgate, a place you must go. Eddie managed to look dismayed, disgusted, and amused all at the same time.
Then say it twice, Roland, because words like that sound like shit to this kid.
The gunslinger shrugged. I don't discuss philosophy. I don't study history. All I know is what's past is past and what's ahead is ahead. The second is Ka and takes care of itself.
Yeah?
Eddie looked northward.
Well, all I see ahead is about 9 billion miles of the same fucking beach. If that's what's ahead, Ka and Kaka are the same thing. We might have enough good shells to pop 5 or 6 more of those lobster dudes, but then we're going to be down to chucking rocks at them. So where are we going?
Roland did wonder briefly if this was a question Eddie had ever thought to ask his brother. But to ask such a question would only be an invitation to a lot of meaningless argument. So he only cocked a thumb northward and said, "There, to begin with." Eddie looked and saw nothing but the same reach of shell and rock-studded gray shingle. He looked back at Roland, about to scoff, saw the serene certainty on his face, and looked again. He squinted. He shielded the right side of his face from the westering sun with his right hand. He wanted desperately to see something. Anything. Shit, even a mirage would do. But there was nothing.
Crap on me all you want to,
Eddie said slowly.
but I say it's a goddamn mean trick. I put my life on the line for you at Balazar's.
I know you did. The gunslinger smiled, a rarity that lit his face like a momentary flash of sunlight on a dismal, luring day. That's why I've done nothing but square deal you, Eddie. It's there. I saw it an hour ago. At first I thought it was only a mirage or wishful thinking. But it's there, all right? Eddie looked again, looked until water ran from the corner of his eyes. At last he said,
I don't see anything up ahead but more beach. And I got 20/20 vision.
I don't know what that means.
It means if there was something there to see, I'd see it.
But Eddie wondered how much further than his own gunslinger's blue bull shooter's eyes could see. Maybe a little. Maybe a lot. You'll see it, the gunslinger said.
See what?
We won't get there today, but if you see as well as you say, you'll see it before the sun hits the water. Unless you just want to stand here chin-jawing, that is.
Ka.
Eddie said in a musing voice. Roland nodded. Ka,
Ka.
Eddie said and laughed.
Come on, Roland. Let's take a hike. And if I don't see anything by the time the sun hits the water, you owe me a chicken dinner. Or a Big Mac. Or anything that isn't lobster.
Come on. They started walking again, and it was at least a full hour before the sun's lower arc touched the horizon when Eddie Dean began to see the shape in the distance. Vague, shimmering, indefinable, but definitely something. Something new,
Okay,
he said.
I see it. You must have eyes like Superman.
Who?
Never mind. You've got a really incredible case of culture lag, you know it?
What?
Never mind. What is it?
Eddie laughed. You're good.
Never mind. What is it?
You'll see. The gunslinger started walking again before Eddie could ask anything else. So if there's that, like the Eddie laughed, you're going to put in that laugh whenever you're reading. You've been doing it all this whole time, so I'll try to keep pause whenever I see that.
Sorry.
So you can just go on with the talking.
Yeah, I'm not trying to do it, but like it happens in my head. I'll get better about it.
No, you're
Read
good.
those parts.
20 minutes later, Eddie thought he did see. 15 minutes after that, he was sure. The object on the beach was still 2, maybe 3 miles away. But he knew what it was. A door, of course. Another door. Neither of them slept well that night, and they were up and walking an hour before the sun cleared the eroding shapes of the mountains. They reached the door just as the morning sun's first rays, so sublime and so still, broke over them. Those rays lighted their stubbly cheeks like lamps. They made their gunslinger 40 again. And Eddie, no older than Roland, had been when he went out to fight Court with his hawk, David, as his weapon. This door was exactly like the first, except for what was writ upon it. The Lady of Shadows.
So,
Eddie said softly, looking at the door which simply stood here, with its hinges grounded in some unknown jam between one world and another, one universe and another. It stood with its graven message, real as rock and strange as starlight. So, the gunslinger agreed. Ka.
Here is where you draw the second of your 3.
Seems so. The gunslinger knew what was in Eddie's mind before Eddie knew it himself. He saw Eddie make his move before Eddie knew he was moving. He could have turned and broken Eddie's arm in 2 places before Eddie knew it was happening, but he made no move. He let Eddie snake the revolver from his right holster. It was the first time in his life he had allowed one of his weapons to be taken from him without an offer of that weapon having first been made. Yet, he made no move to stop it. He turned and looked at Eddie equably. Yep. Equably. Even mildly. Eddie's face was livid, strained. His eyes showed starry whites all the way around the irises. He held the heavy revolver in both hands, and still the muzzle rambled from side to side, centering, moving off, centering again, and then moving off again.
Open it,
he said. You're being foolish, the gunslinger said in the same mild voice. Neither of us has any idea where that door goes. It needn't open on your universe, let alone upon your world. For all either of us know, the Lady of Shadows might have 8 eyes and 9 arms like Suvia. Even if it does open on your world, it might be on a time long before you were born or long after you would have died. Eddie smiled tightly.
Tell you what, Monty, I'm more than willing to trade the rubber chicken and the shitty seaside vacation for what's behind door number 2.
I don't understand you.
I know you don't. It doesn't matter. Just open the fucker.
The gunslinger shook his head. They stood in the dawn, the door casting its slanted shadow toward the ebbing sea.
Open it!
Eddie cried.
I'm going with you. Don't you get it? I'm going with you. That doesn't mean I won't come back. Maybe I will. I mean, probably I will. I guess I owe you that much. You've been square John with me down the line, and I don't think I'm not aware of the fact. But while you get whoever this shadow babe is, I'm going to find the nearest Chicken Delight and pick me up some takeout. Think the 30-piece family pack should do for starters.
You stay here.
You think I don't mean it?
Eddie was shrill now, close to the edge. The gunslinger could almost see him looking down into the drifty depths of his own damnation. Eddie thumbed back the revolver's ancient hammer. The wind had fallen with the break of the day and the ebb of the tide, and the click of the hammer as Eddie brought it to full cock was very clear.
You just try me.
I think I will, the gunslinger said.
I'll shoot you,
Eddie screamed. Ka, the gunslinger replied stolidly, and turned to the door. He was reaching for the knob, but his heart was waiting to see if he would live or die. Ka. And that brings us to the Lady of Shadows. And that also brings us to the end of this stream.
Yeah.
We're going to be catching up. Next is the Lady of Shadows, chapter 1 through 3. But yeah, thank you all so very much for hanging out and listening to our beautiful voices. Thank you, Sneak Thief, for reading with me. Always a pleasure.
I'm allergic to something.
Oh no.
It's making me sneezy.
That's no good. But yeah, check out here on YouTube, _sneak thief. That's I before E, folks.
I remember that.
We play video games. We read books now. We're doing book clubs. We are very interested in people that are interested in us. I mean, that's pretty much how it all works out.
Yeah, we'd like to do more book clubs. We're going to try and fill out an entire playlist on this channel with the full cycle. We're hoping to get some people to come do voices.
Yeah.
We'd like you to join the discussion. Maybe if you've read through them before or this is your first time through, we're still pretty close to the beginning. Like you can catch up with a little bit of heavy reading maybe for a week or so. You can probably catch up pretty quickly.
So we've already read through about half of the book. From the front cover to where this bookmark is, I have that on this channel. Just go back and watch it. And I'll read it to you with some voices from my friends. Also, we're going to be going back before long and reading The Gunslinger. That way we have that on file as well. But yeah, join us on Book Club and let us know what you think. Hit the comment section. Like, comment, subscribe, all the good shit. And y'all have a fantabulous rest of your day, evening, night, whatever it may be. All right, Sneak, tell the viewers good night and your best Eddie voice. Well,
good night.
Yeah. Good night. Love it. All right, good night, everybody. Thank you so much again.